Alright everybody, welcome back. We are now on the actual lab portion of TryHackMe. So what I am going to show you an example of pyramid of pain. So all these things that I was talking about, this is actually how it looks if you want to put a visual aspect to it. See, you have the hash values at the bottom. And remember I told you the attacker can actually change his hash values if he wants to. And IP addresses. He can assign multiple IP addresses to his actual domain, and also he can purchase a domain name and do a lot of typo squatting, doing URL shortenings and all that stuff. And network hosts and artifacts was difficult simply because that's an attacker leaving traces behind. So if he has any type of files that he left from a malicious application, even on the network, if he left if he's showing connections that he had that was suspicious on a works network, then it's going to pop up. And also the tools. Are these the tools that he using to hack? What is he using to gain unauthorized access? And TTP, tactical techniques and procedures. This is really tough because remember, this is actually the framework that shows the techniques that attackers are going to be using. And we'll go into an actual framework later on. So let's go back to TryHackMe. All right, so this is just the introduction of the pyramid of pain, right? Nothing crazy. Hash values. So remember when I was telling you about how MD5 and SHA-1 were previously used, but now because they're vulnerable, they moved to SHA-2 because it's much more secure and it has more bits. It has different variants as well. So one example I like to give is that you can use something called an OSINT tool, which is open source intelligence tool, to determine if it's malicious or not. So one real life example I like to give is I have a hash over here, and the way you would determine if it's malicious or not, I like to use a tool called Virus Total, and you just simply, paste the exact hash inside there. Whew. You see that? 59 out of 73 security vendors and 4 sandboxes flagged this file as malicious. See, these vendors, they describe exactly what makes it malicious, and you can also do like research on what it is and all that good stuff. But that's just a way that I determine how something is malicious. As far as a hash, is one technique, right? And you can see how often it's being executed at your workplace or on your actual server. So that's one method. They have another one called OpSWAT that you can use as well. There's a lot of open source intelligence tools that you can use. So now moving forward, here's the method that shows users using Linux. You don't have to be a pro at Linux or anything like that, but this is one example. He used the command append the hash, which means so whatever the hash was previously, he changed it. You see how this is C57 at the end and this one is E95? He changed it using the append the hash, and then he got it, and that was the output of it. Let's try to answer this question. I already have the answer, but I'll show you what I did. Analyze the report associated with this hash. What is the file name of the sample? So I'm going to click here, see what's going on with it. Cool. You see how at the bottom it even tells you what the actual hash is. So if I had a hash, for example, so if you download something, if you download a file from Google Chrome and you download and it comes with a hash, you can take that hash, put it inside Virus Total, and within the details section, it would typically say signed by Google. That's a way to determine and verify that an actual vendor is actually safe, an actual file that's okay to execute. Yes, so the answer for that was sales receipt. So now moving along, go ahead and minimize this. So now moving along, we're going to IP address. So remember I was saying how he can use a tech method called fast flux. He can change the IP address, and he can use botnets to hide the phishing, web proxy, and malware communications. These are actual commands that's using so that way he can get command and control. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail because I already did it before. So what I am going to do though is answer these questions. So read the following report to answer. What is the first IP address the malicious process PID attempts to communicate with. So, if you don't know, a PID is a process ID. So it literally is assigned, a number is assigned to actually show you which process is on the system. So let me give you an example. So I'm going to click on here, go to this report. All right, cool. So, okay, so what you want to do, you want to look for this 1632. And once you find this, the IP address should complement it. So 1632. Okay, so we found it. You just had to keep scrolling down until you find the actual connections. So this is important. Like I said, this is the IP address portion. So with that being said, I scrolled down, went to connections, and I found PID 1632. So what you will see is voila, the actual IP address that complements the process ID and actually the actual file name as well. So go back, read the following report. What is the first domain name for the malicious process to communicate with? Craftingalegacy.com, because if you look at it, it shows right here in the domain section because the IP address represents the actual domain. So now I'm moving to domain name section. And remember how I was telling you about the actual puny code? So Adidas, it's usually adidas.com, but this will trick somebody if they're not paying attention to this actual ending. But if a user clicks on this, it can literally have a puny code of this link and it redirects. So you start here, it redirects you there, and then all of a sudden you're in a malicious site, you got malware on you, and it's no good. And sometimes too, these are the examples I was given too, the URL shorteners. So a bit.ly.com might redirect you to a malicious link. It could direct you to your Facebook account if you wanted to. It all depends what the attacker wants. So it all depends what his goal is. Which HTTP requests, this is important because it actually shows what resources are being retrieved actually from the web server and seeing exactly if there's a callback or not. Okay, so we're going to answer these questions. What term refers to an address used to access websites? Remember, it's domain name because if you see here, this IP address here is the represents this domain name. Okay, what type of attack uses Unicode and domain name to imitate that unknown domain? It's the puny code attack. Remember I showed you it was an actual link. It was a fake link for the Adidas and to redirect you to a coded link. And then so provide the redirected website for the shortened URL using a preview. So HTTPS. Okay, so what I like to do is because I'm very skeptical. I know this is a training link, but you always got to prepare like you actually doing it for real. So what I like to do, I like to use your URL scan, which is an open source tool as well. Go right here to options, scan visibility, put it on private. So that way it doesn't go out to the public. And you just put the link in. All right, perfect. So you see, this is the redirect that it showed. This is the actual, that's an example of URL shortening. So this is literally the website I'm using to train, TryHackMe. So now it's tryhackme.com, but they want you to do the official. Make sure you put the HTTPS, and you got your answer right there. Host artifacts. Remember, host artifacts can show exactly different IOCs or files that attackers use to show that he actually left pretty much evidence, right? So, all right, one word exe, that may be a common file. And then all of a sudden you see something that's out of character like this, right? Look at this right here. So if you're not familiar with that, that's really going to throw you off. You can do to see if it's malicious or not. One thing, you can always start with the SHA-56 hash, put in virus total, see what it gives you in different OSINT tools. But what I will say is, let's go down the list and answer these questions. So a process name makes a post request to an IP address based in the United States on port 88. So what is the IP address? To get this answer, what I had to do, I had to click this report over here. Okay, so this process makes a post request on the IP address United States. So what I would like to do is just do something simple as this. So just hit Control F, go ahead and paste the file. This is my quick way of navigating. So here we go right here. So it says in United States. So this country, so CO, United States, the first one. And here you got the IP address. So it shows exactly what IP address came from. And it's port 80, 8080, 8080. So pasted that in there. The actor drops a malicious executable, which is the name of this executable. So we go back. So if you notice within this section, so what I did was I had to retract. So what I did was went to files activity, went to drop files, and also I went down here. See, because the original execution file is right here, right? But if you look at drop files, this comes into play. See, you got WinWord, PowerShell, and then this one is just the random one sitting there. And not only on top of that, so if you look, it's also in here as well. See, they try to hide it, but these are the drop files, and these are sometimes difficult for the hackers to get rid of because once it's in there, it shows a history of what's there if he doesn't have a way of already clearing out his method. So you would paste the jup executable file. So now what you want to do is look at this report. All right, cool. You see this? 9 vendors out of 93. The reason why the vendors is important is because if you're trying to determine, don't always solely based off of it because sometimes IP address or a URL may be brand new, so there may not be enough evidence to determine if something is malicious or not. So for example, you got this right here. So 9 out of 93. Me personally, if I see it, yes, I'm going to assume it's malicious because 9 people are telling me, you know what I'm saying, I'm going to be skeptical. Now, if it's one person, like one vendor, but you have to think to yourself, do you actually need this URL? How actually malicious is this URL going to be towards you? Can you take the chances of blocking it? That's what you have to tell yourself. It's 9 vendors out of a total of 93 that reported that this IP address is malicious and it contains malware. Network artifacts. Here's an example of network artifacts. We talked about it, suspicious activity exactly on the actual network. So you can use different protocol analyzers, network protocol analyzers. The one they use here is T-Shark. You can literally do HTTP post requests that has things that's out of the ordinary, that doesn't look normal to you. This is an example of T-Shark that they use. What they did was they ran this command, T-Shark, and what they did once they executed it, in this screenshot as you can see, in Kali Linux, it showed the different user agent strings that popped up, right? So if you want to do this at home, you can set up a virtual machine in VirtualBox or use a hypervisor to actually use these different programs. So with that being said, let's go ahead and answer these questions. What browser uses the user agent string shown in the screenshot above? So what I ended up doing was I ended up doing it inside my own lab, and I actually pasted those user strings and I looked it up on Google, and I actually found out that those user strings actually belong to the Internet Explorer. So that's how I was able to get my answer. And how many post requests in the screenshot from the PCAP file, I noticed that it was a total of 6. So if you count here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So those are suspicious strings that are out of the ordinary that you're not familiar with. Moving on to the tools. Remember, there's multiple tools that you can use to actually, as a hacker, to actually gain unauthorized access. You can use command and control infrastructures. Hackers they can use botnets or different malicious tools to actually gain control of your actual systems. or you can use executable files or DLL files, payloads, or password crackers. And password crackers are just simply used to guess a password of the actual user they're trying to target. And see, you have an example of suspicious executables. You got the payload right here and still the executables, and it actually has the threat actors on there as well. So another term I want to talk about is fuzzy hashing. So one method that's useful for the blue teamer is fuzzy hashing. And what it tells is that you can line up two hashes and find similarities between them by doing a deep analysis. So you can literally decipher the minor differences between the fuzzy hash values. As far as the answer, provide the method used to determine similarity between files is fuzzy hashing, and provide the alternative name for fuzzy hashing without the abbreviations. So one thing I did to get the answer for that was that I went to the SSD webpage, and then if you see at the beginning, it says a program for computer context triggered pieces hashes. I took the context trigger piece hashes and I pasted it in there. Got my answer. Cool. Now we're going to the tip of the actual pyramid. Remember when I was talking about the different tactics, we're not going to go into too much detail here, but the actual tactics and techniques and procedures that the user are using most of the time can be found on the MITRE ATT&CK matrix. So I'm gonna just do a little overview over here. As you can see, you have the different tactics that they can use, reconnaissance, initial accent, and etc. As far as these questions, let me walk through with you. Navigate to the Attack MITRE webpage. How many techniques fall under the exfiltration category? As you can see, if you go to exfiltration, you'll see there's a total of 9 techniques. Data transfer, exfiltration, and honestly, if you're trying to understand how attackers use their methods, I would highly recommend it. It's a free tool that I think everybody should keep in their back pocket. Chimera is a Chinese-based hacking group that has been active since 2018. What is the name of this commercial remote access tool they use for command and control beacons and data exfiltration? We go over here up top to CTI, so which stands for Cyber Threat Intelligence, right? It's just pretty much news about the latest groups and softwares and different type of attacks, right? So we're gonna go to groups, and we're looking for the group name Chimera. Boom, right here. So we have a total of that. And let's go back to the question. Okay, what's the name of the remote access tool they use for C2 beacons and data exfiltrations? So if you see right here, it shows Chimera has used Cobalt Strike to encapsulate C2 and DNS traffic. So it shows it keeps up with their latest techniques that they use, so that way that if an attacker tries to do that and you checking in the logs, you can resort to this and use this as a reference. So Cobalt Strike will be the answer for this portion. That's pretty much about it. Let's see what this conclusion. Oh yeah, it's just pretty much just saying, talking about now that you learned about Pyramid of Pain, and that's pretty much about it. So as far as anything else, that pretty much wraps up the Pyramid of Pain, and I hope you guys enjoyed.